Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
Inside this box is a pair of football boots that are really good, really unique, but also really expensive. They're also very different from what we've come to expect from the Mizuno brand, in that you'll notice that there is no kangaroo leather to be found anywhere on these football boots. Ladies and gentlemen, the brand new made in Japan Mizuno Alpha, this being in the 2022 World Cup Azure Blue colorway, bearing a retail price of $320, making this the same price as the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, but also tied for being the most expensive top-end regular release football boot currently on the market. And when it comes to made in Japan Mizuno product, I've always thought that the price was more justified in not just the build quality of the product, but the quality of the kangaroo leather. Nobody does leather like Mizuno, but when you take the Mizuno Alpha, a football boot that is completely synthetic and now competing against more popular options that retail for around $250 as a starting point, are these worth $70 more than the much more popular and perhaps well-proven alternatives? In other words, are you better off paying $250 for a pair of top-end Mercurials or $320 for a pair of Mizuno Alphas? That's exactly the question that I hope to answer for you in today's video as we go over all the technical details of the Mizuno Alpha, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. And really quickly, if you enjoy the content, find it helpful, and just enjoy seeing reviews of football boots from less popular brands, drop a like on the video and make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2022. So first things first, what's the point of the Mizuno Alpha? And I guess to make a long story short, this is Mizuno finally going a little bit mainstream in terms of the concept of this football boot. Obviously, they've had the Morelia Neo as their speed boot offering for a very long time, and that will remain in place as an offering. What the Alpha replaces is the Rebula series. So the Rebula Cup is no more, and you no longer have 3 kangaroo leather options within the Mizuno brand: Morelia and Morelia Neo in leather, and now Mizuno Alpha in full synthetic, which again kind of fits the mold of what I think most people expect a speed boot to be in 2022 as we head into 2023. And honestly, I think they've done a very good job. It's something that I think a lot of people have been asking for a long time, because while Mizuno is not a huge brand in the world of football boots, as a company, they're gigantic, and the technologies that they have across all of their sports are really impressive. So it's about time that they take some of that technical ability and work it into a very, very modern pair of football boots, which I think they've done really well here with the Mizuno Alpha. The downside is, of course, they're super expensive. And I'm gonna sound like a bit of a broken record throughout this video, but is that price tag justified given what you can get for so much less from other brands? Now, before we get into the specifics of the upper, I want to take a look at the physical weight of the Mizuno Alpha, specifically how it compares to what was their speed boot offering, and I guess what technically still is, in the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, because these are both really light boots. They're both similar in terms of overall concept, but according to Mizuno, the Alpha does that speed boot concept in a much more focused and, dare I say, hardcore way. So surely they should be significantly lighter, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, both the made in Japan version, by the way, 7.4 ounces, the equivalent of 209 grams, which is actually very lightweight, but there are certainly lighter speed boots out there. Then we'll throw on the Mizuno Alpha, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.7 ounces, the equivalent of 190 grams. So clearly a significant weight difference between the two, one that I would say is more noticeable in hand rather than on feet. But in terms of physical weight, the Mizuno Alpha is technically way lighter than the Morelia Neo 3 Beta. However, if we take a pair of Mercurial Vapor 15 Elites in the same size, you can see that they weigh in at 6.55 ounces, the equivalent of 186 grams, which is technically only 4 grams lighter, but 4 grams lighter at $70 less. I'm not trying to say that it's all about weight, but considering the super high price tag, they haven't done anything groundbreaking here. As for the upper, like I mentioned, no leather to be found here, something that we haven't seen from Mizuno since the Basara line, where the synthetic model was okay, but admittedly the leather version that they also offered was significantly better. This, I would argue, is the best synthetic upper I've ever tried on a pair of Mizuno football boots. It's a 5-layer synthetic made from a woven material called Engineered Fit, and basically what you're going to find is it shares some elements from past Mizuno boots, predominantly the Mizuno Rebula 3 as well as the Mizuno Morelia Neo 2 Beta, which both of those boots I thought were phenomenal. You'll notice that there's some texture to the upper that you can see in the form of this internal cage. That's actually made from a really thin foam material, and it's going to be the thickest part of the upper. To the touch, you can feel that little bit of cushion that it has on offer, and then there's a woven material like a textile sitting over top of that with a fuse overlay, and then if you open up the boot, you can see on the inside, the lining material is this super soft and incredibly thin, almost sock-like material that really helps this boot feel significantly more comfortable than I think it otherwise would. And if you're comparing it to other thin synthetic boots on the market, this really feels like one that prioritizes comfort and fit over absolutely everything else, but that's not to say that it doesn't do other things really well too. With fit and comfort, in my opinion, really being the one thing that the Alpha does better than any other speed boot currently on the market. And that's not to say that you can't get a comfortable fit from significantly less expensive options, but I really feel like they nailed the shape of this boot. I think the feel of this upper on your foot is fantastic. It does have some ugly creasing when you bend. You will notice that during the on-feet portion of the video, but in general, the touch on the ball is super clean, it's very consistent, and the adjustability in particular that you get from a central lacing system and a standalone tongue, a borderline traditional design, dare I say, makes the world of difference in terms of how customizable this upper feels when you tie the laces tight. It wraps your foot perfectly. It's based on the same shape, so it's built on the same last as the Morelia Neo 3 Beta, which is definitely not a bad thing. And the end result, like I said, is a pair of football boots that feel immediately comfortable. And in the realm of everything that has these super thin synthetic uppers, this to me has the most comfortable fit and certainly the most comfortable feel. From a touch perspective, the boots are extremely thin and raw. If you're looking for that ultimate barefoot sensation, this does that as well as just about anything out there. And honestly, the touch on the ball from this upper actually is very reminiscent of the Vaporposit Plus that you're going to find currently from the Vapor 15 and Superfly 9 Elite in the Nike Mercurial series. The tongue is super thin, a little bit thinner than the rest of the upper, and I honestly would have preferred if they put some very slight padding there just to eliminate what is very subtle lace bite, but not necessarily to the point where I think it's an issue. This is almost more of a personal preference. And you'll also notice that the upper does have a little bit of a shiny finish to it. There is some additional grip that you will notice on the ball. Again, very similar to what you're going to find from the Mercurial series. Of course, the downside of any super thin synthetic upper is protection. There is none to be found here. If you get stepped on, you're going to feel every bit of it. But in terms of giving you that super consistent barefoot feel anywhere on your foot, you're definitely getting that from the Mizuno Alpha. And from that perspective, if you're worried about buying a Mizuno synthetic boot, given that it's not really their specialty, this being their first try in a while, I think they absolutely nailed it. Moving to the rear, the boots do maintain a low-cut design, just like every other pair of Mizunos. A little bit of an extension piece at the back, but for the most part, that remains pretty low. And you'll notice the opening is quite long and fairly large, kind of a signature of Mizuno football boot shaping, but it's contoured very nicely and it seems to wrap the sides of your ankle very closely as well. They also put the perfect amount of padding around the top edge just to maintain a really comfortable fit. And honestly, the finishing between the upper and the liner, how the two come together, I think is really impressive and very cleanly done. Speaking of the liner, it has this really cool kind of silicone grippiness to it. You can see it's almost like a coated mesh type material. There's a perfect amount of padding, not too much, not too little. And when you slide your foot inside, they are immediately comfortable along with that additional grip. It just really helps to hold your foot in place, preventing any kind of heel slippage. And in general, these have phenomenal heel lockdown. I also like the fact that they do give you that additional lace hole if you want to have the boots grab your heel a little bit deeper to help hold them in place if you are finding some issues in regards to slippage for whatever reason. Then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It has the same kind of grippy texturing on the surface, and it's made from a single layer of this blue foam that's actually on the thicker side, but ultimately feels pretty ordinary. Which is interesting because Mizuno Energy Foam is listed as a tech spec, one of their premium foam cushion materials that you're gonna find in some of their running lines. The insole is not clearly marked as Energy Foam, and I'm assuming it's not, just based on how ordinary it feels. And the only thing I could find on this boot is that there's a little bit of a foam insert underneath your heel. I'm talking really, really thin, even thinner than this insole, and it's not something that you feel whatsoever. So if you're buying these boots with the hope that Mizuno Energy Foam is going to provide this incredible underfoot cushion or some kind of responsiveness, it's pretty much nowhere to be found based on what I can tell and based on what I've experienced. As for the sole plate and stud pattern, it is all new tooling, and it does also include an external heel counter, something that I'm personally a big fan of. However, if we really break down what they've done here, it is more or less an exact variation of what's on offer from the Neo 3 Beta, with triangular studs rather than rounded ones, which does admittedly provide a little bit of additional bite, a slightly more aggressive feel when compared to the Neo 3 Beta. But ultimately, I think the differences are pretty subtle. You'll also notice what kind of looks like carbon fiber poking its way through the forefoot area, very similar to what you'd find from an Adidas X Speed Portal, for example, but that is not actually carbon fiber. Look a little closer, and it's a plastic type of material that just has a carbon fiber pattern kind of texture on the surface. And if you remove the insole, you can actually see the insert inside of the football boot. It's almost identical to what you're going to find on the Morelia Neo 3 Beta. It might actually be the exact same thing, and it does make for this very kind of responsive spring-back effect when you're bending the boot in your hands. However, on feet, I have to say, it ends up feeling relatively ordinary. I don't think there's any noticeable energy return from this particular element. And again, it just feels normal, pretty much identical to a Neo 3 Beta. If you've ever had those and you like that sole plate and stud pattern, I can't see why you wouldn't enjoy this one as well. On feet, I think the Mizuno Alphas look great and feel even better. Like I mentioned, these feel like a pair of speed boots where comfort and fit was very much prioritized, and especially in a world of all these speed boots having one-piece upper constructions, which don't allow for the most amount of adjustability, going with this nice deep central lacing system with a standalone tongue really makes you appreciate how simplicity can sometimes result in a better overall fit. And I think the shape of this boot is something that Mizuno really nailed. It's on the same last as the Neo 3 Beta, like I mentioned. So if you fit well in those and you were curious about these, they're gonna have a very similar shape to them. However, the feel of this upper is quite a bit different in that it hugs your foot snugly, but it doesn't squeeze your feet. It's kind of like the opposite of a Mercurial in the sense that they fit very closely. It wraps your foot, leaving no extra space inside the football boot, but they're not suffocating your feet in any way, which is something that I've personally never really been a big fan of when it comes to some top-end speed boots. But again, that's very much a personal preference thing. And who am I to say that squeezing your feet is a bad thing when the Mercurial series is realistically the most popular line of football boots currently on the market. So again, it really does depend on what you're looking for, but I love the shape, the lockdown through the heel, the insole even having that grip texturing I think is awesome, and the sole plate, like I mentioned, does ultimately end up feeling pretty normal compared to all the amazing sole plate tech that is currently on offer from some of the competition of the Mizuno Alpha. From a width perspective, these have plenty of width and just so much adjustability to them because of the more traditional construction. So even if you had wide feet, I think these are gonna work. If you have narrow feet, they're gonna fit really well too. And as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and just like the Neo 3 Beta, these do run about a quarter size long. So not long enough for me to justify going down in size, but if you're wearing a pair of football boots right now that already have a little bit of extra space, going half a size down is probably something that I'd recommend doing, but for most people, true to size should work out just fine. So in conclusion, when it comes to fit, feel, and overall performance, the Mizuno Alpha does not disappoint. I think that it delivers in almost every aspect of what you would want a speed boot to be, and if we were to rank them amongst all of the current offerings in the speed category, which I'll probably do in an upcoming video, I would say hesitantly that it's pretty easily going to be in the top 3, with the order of that top 3 depending heavily on your own personal preferences. But then there's the price, $320. Is that at all justified considering other options that you can get for significantly less? And I really do think objectively, the answer to that question is no, these are not worth it. But subjectively, and this again really plays into the personal preference aspect of football boots that I think is very much overlooked more often than not. It's great to have something that performs well, but if it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't fit right, if they're not comfortable on your feet, none of that matters. From a comfort perspective, this is for me the most comfortable speed boot currently on the market. Objectively, however, I think there are more impressive options. At $250, I think the Mercurial Vapor 15 Elite from Nike is technically the much more impressive football boot and objectively the better performer. But subjectively, I find the fit and overall comfort of the Mizuno Alpha, at least on my feet, to be significantly better. That's not to say this is an uncomfortable football boot, but for me, this is the most comfortable speed boot currently on the market. And here in lies the question that you kind of have to answer for yourself as to whether or not these are worth $70 more than these. Bearing in mind that we are dealing with very fine margins here, because while I do find these more comfortable, that is not to say that I don't think that the Vapor 15 is also a really comfortable pair of football boots. And that $70 price difference is really what you have to justify for yourself. And it's kind of more or less always been the case with Made in Japan Mizuno products. It's really good and you do get what you pay for, but it's not necessarily going to be that much better considering how much more it costs. And that really is my conclusion here on the Mizuno Alpha. If you can justify it and this is your style of football boot, I think you're really going to enjoy them. But if you're simply thinking, is this the best football boot in the speed category that money can buy? The answer to that question from a value for money perspective is probably no.